Hello, welcome to the Amphibian Press podcast. I'm Sarah Voris, and with me today is the Colorado Resistance Reads team, or at least four of the authors. And it's a really great little group. They're all from Colorado, and they joined forces to use their platforms as authors to help some really incredibly important organizations. Tierman, if you want to give us a little bit more detail on the organization that you have created, that'd be great.
Actually, I'm going to hand this over to Kate.
Okay.
Organizer.
Awesome.
Who goes, hey, hi, can we talk?
Yeah, I am a serial organizer, I have to admit. So I overextend myself that way all the time, but with authors, it's always worth it.
Mm-hmm.
So basically the idea came from, I'm someone who, whatever is doing around in my head ends up on the page. And I often work out ideas there and work out what I believe there through both writing and reading. And especially with the election coming up, the midterms, I got this idea in my head that I'm not the only one who does this. I know that for a fact. I know a lot of people, a lot of writers work out their ideas on the page. And I also think that reading can be a truly transformative act for the reader. Reading can open your mind to new ideas, new perspectives, and therefore sharing these books, it's not really a self-promotion so much as we really want these ideas to get out there. We want people to talk about them. And I also love the idea of the things that mean the most to us, especially the themes represented in our books, are the charities we're going to be giving to from Black Friday till Colorado Gives Day on the 4th of December. So it's about a 2-week window, and we'll all be giving 50% of our proceeds from the book participating to the charity of our choice.
That's fantastic. And I love that you have different charities for each of your books. That sort of adds a nice touch to it, for sure. So if you'd like to tell us a little bit about your specific book, that would be great.
Well, okay, I guess I'll start again, sure. So my novel is Transference. We actually are all novelists. We're all working in fiction. And Transference is a dark comedy. It's about a psychiatrist with a telepathic patient. Now, the psychiatrist is a little bit of a #MeToo nightmare, and not exactly a pleasant fellow. So that's something that's running throughout the book is kind of the increased knowledge in our society, how we're all adjusting to new ideas of sexuality and sexual abuse and power and all those things. But the telepath is also the wife of a fictional Colorado senator, and her cause of choice is refugee aid. It becomes a big part of her plot line. And therefore, I'm donating the proceeds of my book to IRC, International Rescue Committee, which is a very well-known and well-established refugee resettlement and aid foundation. They have a branch here in Denver, and they do really good work resettling, mostly from African countries here in Denver, but from all over the world. So it's a really great organization.
Awesome. And Jason, would you like to tell us a little bit about your book as well?
Sure. My book is Finding Life on Mars. Let's see if I can, there we go.
Oh, poster behind you. That's awesome.
Yeah, Finding Life on Mars. And this is ostensibly a science fiction story about a colony on Mars that isn't doing very well. The last man on Earth, sort of for undisclosed reasons, has it out for them. But the character themes of the story are about autism and not fitting in, relating as an autistic person to neurotypical people back and forth. Now I'm an existential psychologist as well as an author. So also there's the existential themes. Not only do these people have to figure out how to survive, but also why. Like, what is the meaning of life in a place that never really changes, where there are no more supplies coming from your support planet, where you need fluorescent lights to grow corn and you have no means to make new fluorescent lights when they die. The slow, gradual deterioration of the world, the end of life creeping up, suddenly highlighted by this imminent threat. It takes place in the context of global warming. Right, global warming has happened in this story. You have some flashbacks to it happening. So my cause, perhaps counterintuitively, is the ACLU of Colorado. if we were to ask people what is the function of government, we would get some very different answers from almost everybody. Nearly as many answers as there are Americans. But I think we can almost all agree that a role of government is to solve problems that are too big for any individual person. So some of the propaganda you'll get in the modern age is climate change is the result of individual choices. If you drive an SUV, climate change is your fault. But switching from an SUV to an electric car is going to do nothing in the face of climate change. We need large, broad-scale government interventions. But for our government to work for us on these sorts of issues, then we need organizations like the ACLU. The ACLU of Colorado doesn't have a lot of voter disenfranchisement cases to work on, but the broader ACLU organization really does. When we're all represented, then we can start to solve the big, scary, existential threats out there in the world today.
Mm-hmm. I love that with the connection of you need to know that you yourself are going to survive the week, the year, whatever, before you really can even stomach thinking about that bigger scope, for sure. And Brian, would you like to tell us a little bit about your work?
So mine is Where to Fire the Electric Man. It's ostensibly a superhero novel, but both of the main characters in it are homeless. And they both get abducted by a secret organization and experimented on and given powers, but they do very different things with it. One eventually becoming the hero and the other definitely becoming a villain and having her own arcs for later. And while I was writing it, I had some life happen and found myself without a place to live, without a car, without a source of food. I lost 10 pounds in a week because I wasn't eating. And I think it really gave me some perspective to write more about this. Homelessness in Colorado is something I'd already been researching. And in general, we really don't treat the homeless well. The police regularly kick them out of places, take their belongings, throw things away. In some cases, literally everything they own except the clothes on their backs. There was a thing in the news recently, I think in Georgia, about police that were pouring bleach on food that was intended to be given to the homeless if they had something to eat. And so the timing of this, for me, worked really well because, we're coming into some cold weather in Colorado. Fortunately, not as cold as some areas get, but certainly nowhere I would want to live outside. And I got lucky when it happened to me. It was August. So for mine, and I'm including all of the Kindle page reads with that. I'm going to be giving to a group called Access Housing, which focuses on helping at-risk families stay in homes, already lost their homes, get somewhere new, and then hopefully be able to stay there.
That's awesome. And I'm glad to see you're doing a little bit better now. Now, Tierman, if you would like to give us a little backstory about your book, it'd be great.
Yeah, my book is called The Hands Forgiven. I'm going to try to upload a picture of the cover.
Oh, awesome. Jason has it. There you go.
Oh, that's not it. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Jason held it up, so we got a quick glimpse.
Oh, you're a lovely person. Thanks.
That's what friends are for.
So, it is a story set in 2165, and climate change has already happened. A lot of things are not so nice anymore. For example, corn and grain crops come in at about a 45% survival rate. That has started to do to society. And as things went downhill, the American government got more and more fractious to the point where they deadlocked for 11 months and weren't able to fund the government for 11 months. a lot of big corporations stepped in at this time and said, hey, if you pay your taxes directly to us, we'll pay you. So by short starts, that happened about 90 to 100 years ago, and everything's run for a profit, including people's lives. So this focuses on a group of resistance fighters outside that system. And this story began, by the way, OE Chairman is a pen name. I write with a co-writer, and we write under this pen name to keep our personal lives separate from our writing lives, because we write a lot of controversial stuff, and neither of us wants to deal with bullshit. Yeah. So we write about a gang of troublemakers, misfits, and wild cards. That's their nickname. And the story is mostly about finding the strength in each person. No matter how badly they fit in one situation, there's somewhere where they fit. There's somewhere where they are the best tool for the job. And the best thing to do for a society is find where each person fits. Because the more that each person is allowed to reach their potential, the better that group is, the better that society is. When we throw people away, we lose out as a society. But beyond that, the reason we started writing this was as a form of resistance against not just the situation, but resistance against the reaction on the left, which seemed to be anger, despair, and nihilism. Mm-hmm. So we go to a world where we said, okay, this is the worst it could possibly get, barring the whole species dies. This is, everything sucks and we are screwed. But there will still be people who take care of each other. There will still be people playing rock music and laughing and taking care of business and fighting. And there will still be hope. Essentially, we're telling a story that says, giving up is lazy. Fight back and take care of each other and keep doing it, no matter what.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Now, if we want to go into a little bit more about each of your writing sort of as a broader picture, just to get to know you guys a little bit more, and then we'll sort of circle back around to the causes and whatnot. So let's just go in the same order. Kate, you want to talk a little bit more?
So the question is just a little bit more about myself?
About yourself and about your work, and I mean, as much as you're comfortable sharing, obviously. So.
Sure. Well, I'm a Colorado girl. I'm from Colorado, and I have a very intense connection to the state. I think, think global, act local has always been very close to my heart. So I grew up in Colorado. I studied creative writing in college, but I kind of went into journalism to pay the bills. So for a long time, I worked for regional magazines and newspapers, writing features, mostly food, got into food writing, which is super fun. But always in the back of my mind has been the dream of being a novelist. Since the time I could read novels, I wanted to write novels. It has really felt like a calling since I was a little girl. And, you get into your 30s and you're like, wait, what just happened? You have to pay the bills, you have to pay the rent, and our society really pushes you that direction. They want you to, contribute, be the cog in the machine, make sure everything goes correctly. So being an indie author in general is kind of an act of rebellion, I believe. You're working outside the capitalist system, really. You're avoiding the gatekeepers, the big publishers and things like that. So the last 2 years, I've really been learning how to do this indie author thing. Transference came out in August of 2017. I'm working on a dystopia now. I do also a lot of other sci-fi and speculative work, and I'm very active in my critique communities. But in terms of Transference and where it came from, it is definitely a trip. I would never, ever have thought that my first novel would be from the point of view of just this icky, sarcastic, middle-aged douchebag. Sorry, but he is. He's a psychiatrist, but he's crossed his boundaries. He had a consensual affair with a patient, and that's clear from, page 1. Mm-hmm. But he started talking to me one day in this, acerbic, witty, self-deprecating voice. And I just kind of let him keep talking. And at first it was a short story. And then it became like, wow, this is a novella, I guess. And then it was a novel. It didn't begin that way, but it really organically formed into my first novel. And so I have this place in my heart for this icky guy, even though, yeah, very weird creation for a progressive feminist, I suppose. But I've always liked unlikable characters. And I really enjoy how the main character challenges people. Mm-hmm. I've gone to book clubs that have discussed the book, and I'll ask them things like, well, do you think he has been redeemed? Do you think it's possible to have redemption after making these kind of mistakes? And what does that entail? What does that look like? Because I think those are questions we need to ask ourselves. And sometimes it's easier to do that when it's Dr. Verbank, this fictional character that you're talking about, mm-hmm. rather than someone real in real life. And you get to kind of work out your ideas of, well, what do I really think about this? So I really think it's a valuable tool in a book club environment because it is challenging. And in the end, I'm really grateful to him for this weird character.
I think it is important to have a degree, compassion isn't necessarily the word I want to use, but a degree of understanding in those conversations. Otherwise, it is this sort of shouting match between two sides, and that can be very hard to engage in. I mean, for everyone, it's exhausting and it's, confrontational, and sometimes it's necessary. But yeah, I do think it is important to have that.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I really believe that immersion in a character is empathy, mm-hmm. right? Like you said, it's not quite compassion. It's not quite, I want to be like this person. Right. But it's kind of understanding where they're coming from. So getting immersed in a character that's very unlike yourself is always a mind-opening experience.
For sure. So Jason, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. We have not coordinated ahead of time because we didn't have the questions, but I'm going into a very similar place to Kate. I'm an autistic man, and once upon a time, in the deep past, 1,000 years ago, I was an autistic child. Mm-hmm. And for those of us who are doing fairly successful impersonations of humans in society, there's usually some pathway out of our inner world into your shared sort of consensus reality. Mm-hmm. More often than not, that pathway is some form of fiction. It might be Disney movies, and you relate to Disney, and I relate to Disney. We can bat the lines back and forth. Sometimes it's quoting Big Lebowski. Usually it's something a bit more deep and meaningful than that. So my mother, just by coincidence, was a fan of Golden Age science fiction. I discovered reading at about 13 and went through Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke, Robert Heinlein. When I was finished with all the Golden Age science fiction, the more pulpy 70s stuff, then she discovered Stephen King, and I did too. And then after Stephen King, it was Dean Koontz, sort of the poor person Stephen King, read all of that, James Herbert, the poor British person's Stephen King. We're also British, another disability in some contexts. Yeah. So really, sitting with a person and having face-to-face dialogue with them was often for me much too troubling. It's overstimulating. I don't like the eye contact, especially as a kid. I was really weird. We get a ton of negative feedback. But you start reading literature, and I'd get more and more after all of that pulpy stuff, more and more into difficult themes written in difficult language. That really gives you an insight into the ideas other people have, into how did they get that way. Villains, right? Villains are always the hero in their own story. And if you write a villain really well, like your sexually harassing psychiatrist, then we understand that person a little bit better. And they're not just a foil anymore. They're not just, this is the thing I'm reacting against. They're understandable. You can have empathy. I would suggest backing up and having compassion. Compassion means that I understand how you feel. Empathy is I feel the same way. In my career, I've had to work with sex offenders, and that's a very important line, at least in this little space here. That's an important line to draw, right? I can understand why you're a sex offender, and I don't feel that way.
It's a good distinction. I love that.
Around about age 15, what I found out was that writing was even more fun than reading. So I did. I wrote my first novels at age 15. They live in desk drawers. No, you may not see them. Went on a little bit of hiatus, no positive feedback for that. After graduate school in my 30s, after broadening my horizons, learning psychotherapy, really getting a face-to-face functional understanding of empathy, refining my human impersonation, as it were, I wanted to go back to writing, because I have feelings sometimes, or emotions, or thoughts that are 30% primary process that don't have words that go with them, and it takes maybe 80,000 words to communicate that felt sense or that emotion to somebody else. So that's what I do, and I write for me. I don't care if people ever buy them. I hope people buy enough that I can give some money to Colorado ACLU next month. But by and large, buy them, don't buy them. They're not for you. They're for me. But people do read them, and are left often with that same felt sense that inspired that writing work. And to me, that's enough. That's enough.
That's the point. So Brian, do you want to tell us a little bit more about your backstory as well?
I like what's been said so far about challenging characters, about relating to flawed characters that have real problems. I think that brings them more to life. And to me, that's part of what writing is about, is taking a concept and bringing it to life. I was diagnosed with major depression in second grade, and that's something that has never completely gone away. And I got really into writing as an escape, into reading, rather, as an escape as a child, as a way to experience other people's lives and feel alive vicariously through fictional characters. And as I was getting older and trying to understand what was wrong with me, and asking myself a lot of deep questions and trying to figure life out, writing became a way to explore some of those concepts, be able to take an idea and say, okay, well, where does this go? Where can I take this? And those kinds of what-if kinds of questions have always driven the writing that I've done. After the crash, this superhero series I started with, and I'm two books into so far, kind of started with, okay, well, people, it's like every hero gets their own origin story, but usually the universe they're set in doesn't really explain why there's people with powers. X-Men covered it with mutation, but a lot of other things just kind of leave it as, well, it's happening. And so for me, it got started with just kind of this daydreaming exploration of, well, what are some ways that maybe it could have? And so in this world, there's an alien ship that has crashed, and we can't get into it. There's been no communication with the aliens. We're pretty sure they're all dead inside. It's been a few years. But we're starting to see people with powers now. And these two things are probably connected in some way. So that's given me a lot of areas to play with. Okay, so now we've got this universe. What can happen to characters and flawed people, and give them things that they're forced to react to? And in the case of Rectifier, part of that is about them being abducted and experimented on. A theme that will continue in later books. But Oliver, the protagonist, if you will, he's homeless because he made a lot of really bad decisions, and some of them came from watching his fiancée die of brain cancer, which led to drug problems and things like this, and rehab and losing his job. And once things start to go downhill, it's easy for them to really, really spiral. And ends up at a point where he's on the street just wanting to survive, just wanting to be left alone, until he's given these powers and let the lab thought he died in the process, so they dump him in a mass grave with all the other failures. So he gets back to some of his friends, if you will, acquaintances that he shelters with, and he's still just wanting to be left alone. And people are telling him, no, you have powers now. You can control. And some of the people that he's around, he's got some baggage with, including a sexual encounter that shouldn't have happened. And he's got that to deal with. And when that girl and some others get abducted next, he's like, okay, now I really have to do something. And so he's got to confront a lot of his own failures and a lot of his own mistakes while forcing himself to accept, okay, fine, I guess I'm going to have to do this hero thing. Whereas the antagonist, Maria, homeless not through bad decisions of her own, but just life and circumstance, layoffs and things, trying to make her life better. She's working her way up. She's gathering prostitutes and basically becoming their pimp and helping them off and getting them all into better positions and housing and things like this. Then she gets abducted and ends up telepathic and not just reading minds, but seeing someone and instantly knowing everything there is to know about. And so there's some exploration with, wow, what does that do to somebody? And so there are themes that I just had a lot of fun exploring.
That's awesome. Now, Tiernan, do you want to give us a little bit more about your background and how it connects to the cause?
Well, I'm going to start by saying it's my co-writer who's trained in the skill of writing. They're the one who really studied writing as a craft. I come from a storytelling background.
Mm-hmm.
I have a very weird family from Upper Wisconsin, and we're torn in half in a lot of ways. We're a mixed race family, and I've always kind of given the impression that I came out the wrong color. We are a family that's very proud of our traditions, but we're also extremely driven to size. Everybody in my family, when we get together, we talk about, oh, I've done this and I have this job and this and this and this. But we're also a family with a congenital problem where we produce too much adrenaline and too much insulin. And that manifests in a lot of ways. We have a lot of autoimmune problems. So a lot of us have anxiety. I'm on that end of things. And some of us have depression. When I was born, I had 27 first cousins. I now have 24. So storytelling is what holds us together and keeps us from killing each other, essentially. In my family, storytelling is to get everything out and to connect. And it's a way for us all to be in the same room in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
I came from that background, but my mom wanted us to move up in the world. So other take navigation lessons. I know that I have odd ways of trying to ape a British accent. That's why. And we started moving from contract to contract with my mother, who was a writer contractor. So I had 3 schools before I hit high school. I was that freaky kid who'd show up one day, cuss you out in 3 languages if you messed with me, punch you if you messed with me, and then go and cry in the bathroom. I was good at putting on a face in public. And that was also to me a form of storytelling. Then I hit Denver and fell in love and decided to stay. And then I said, oh, crap. I'm going to be here a while. I guess I have to make friends. I started an Irish speaking club. And I'm a co-writer through that. We both speak Irish. Tiernan is actually the word in Irish for sanctuary. So that's why we chose it. And my co-writer introduced me to play-by-post storytelling. A couple of years went on and we played together all the time. And then it came up that they had this idea for this guy and his crazy bomb-swinging sister. And I said, I'm in. That sounds fun, because I've had this image. When I think in pictures, I had this image of this little girl sitting and writing code, and she's got ace bandages all the way up her arm. I have no idea what's going on with her, but I want to find out. And then 2016 hit like a sledgehammer. And it went from this vaguely amusing 80s ripoff story to, holy crap, we gotta get some of these emotions out. And my co-writer is gender fluid, leaning towards trans. And so a lot of their issues went into the story. A lot of my issues about human worth went into the story. And all of 2016 went into the story. I was like, holy shit, what the hell? And I studied the Gilded Age as a hobby. So as we were talking, I kept trying to comfort friends by saying, hey, we went through the Gilded Age. We dealt with Taft. We dealt with Hot Dome. We dealt with all this shit. And people made it. Not everybody, but people made it. We can do this. And my friends would say, yeah, but what if, somebody like Pullman, who ran the Pullman train car company, what if he lived now? We'd be screwed. And my response was, all right, how do we get around that? And that was one of the genesis of the story. But yeah, a lot of my storytelling is still rooted in that older tradition of symbolism and story. And there's also a really heavy dash of way too much 80s music. As I was driving cross country with my mom and my brother, I would just throw on Styx and, all the classics, Rush. Thinking about it, I go to a lot of steampunk conventions and a lot of historical conventions. I thought, you see somebody at a historical convention with a 16th century helmet, a 10th century whatever, and a pair of 14th century boots. Just thinking, what's it going to be like in 100 years when they look back at now and they mix up the 50s through the 90s? Because it's not your period. Mm-hmm. So one of our characters very much embodies that urge to learn about the past without the connection to actually understand it sometimes, or not enough information. Let me put it that way. Not enough information to get it right yet. And so there is that longing for a past that maybe never was, but a dream of what we should have been, maybe not what we were, along with a hope that we can be something more than what we are. And a lot of our story revolves around human improvement. Like I said, from my own background and from my co-writers, we have urges to improve ourselves in different ways. And I'm a little more caught up in the capitalist concept than I would like to be sometimes. The idea that you have to be worthy, you have to rise. And that's a great mix with anxiety, because sometimes you sit back going, what am I worth? What am I worth? The reason I say that is because you start exploring those concepts of what are you worth and how do you make yourself worthy? So yeah, that's kind of all of that.
That's awesome. I love the whole point of hope. It sort of circles around to my final topic, which would be, a lot of despair. We've talked about this. A lot of despair has come forth in the wake of 2016. I was also writing during 2016, and I actually having to re-release that book now because I just shut down, and I didn't go to the inspiration part of things. I just did the bare bones stuff. But I wanted to leave this chat, especially with the midterms that I just passed, with sort of a more hopeful, uplifting note. And for me, seeing people come together in the past few years has been really inspiring and really hopeful, even though the reasoning is awful. And I just wanted to go around and ask for each of you, what has been the thing that has inspired the most hope in the past few years? So, Kate?
Ooh, that's a hard one.
I know, it shouldn't be, but it is.
Yeah, 2016, just the clown car of the election it basically started in 2014 right?
Mm-hmm.
And it just kept going and getting crazier, almost like a performance art piece or something. Like, really? Is this reality? That is still going on, sadly. But what gives me hope is, I think Tierman touched on a little bit, and also I'm a student of history, that sometimes we have to be tested to move forward. I personally am very into yoga and the yogic principles, and Kali is my favorite goddess because she's the goddess of death, but also the goddess of rebirth. So sometimes you have to raise things to the ground before you can build anew. And I think that's where I get my personal hope, is that I think right now we are burning away all of the insidious behind the scenes things that were influencing our culture in bad ways. Money, sexism, discrimination, intense competition and capitalism, human worth, wealth inequality, all these things that are happening behind the surface of your everyday life that you don't really notice. Now we see them. And it's going to be hard to burn them all to the ground, but hopefully we come forward with something new and better and different and move forward. And I do think fiction has a lot to do with that. And not just fiction, but stories. If you think about the stories we tell each other about the news, the stories we tell each other about current events, it's not just facts, it's how we see them. And reframing this as, this is not the worst period of human history, not by a long shot. We have gone through much more civil unrest, physical danger. It feels really urgent at the moment. But this is not the worst period of human history, and we could, what we tend to do is make mistakes and improve from them. And I wish we didn't have this big mistake that was, you know, the Trump presidency and the rise of the alt-right and white nationalism and all these things. But sometimes, like I said, it has to come up for it to be battled. And I don't know, I do take hope, like you did, from seeing people on the front lines. I mean, seeing people come out of their houses and be like, okay, I'm taking part in the larger community. I am more than just myself. I am everybody. That is really heartening. I love to see that.
Hell yes.
So, Jason, do you want to tell us what has inspired hope in you?
Oh yeah, you're right in my wheelhouse now. I have one nonfiction title. This is Values of Pain, and this is exactly what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
For me, the despair is the hope. The hope is the despair. Americans tend to be very optimistic people, and because you're optimistic, you think that you're hopeful. But this is another place where we're going to have a little clash of language. Optimism is naive. Optimism is the wish that things will get better. It's going to be okay. You know, there are scientists in the world and they will solve climate change. That's bullshit. That it's not going to be okay. You're going to die. I'm going to die. We're all going to get sick and suffer first, right? It's not going to come out all right. Real hope, actually, to my mind, absolutely requires despair first. Despair is looking things in the face. With despair, we have sat knee to knee and eye to eye with the problem, taken its measure, seen that there is no cause for optimism, and we suffer for that. Depressed people who experience clinical levels of depression are not unrealistic. They're more realistic than the rest of us, and unable on average to delude themselves that things are going to be all right, that life is good. They know what their social standing is. They know who their friends are. They know what the economy's like. They know their chances. This is why it's so difficult to treat depression, because we try to give them optimism instead of hope. To me, the despair is the hope. The fact that so many people have joined me in despair in the last 2 years is cause for great hope. In 2016, we all put on our pink pussy hats and marched in the streets. And that was a start, but that looked optimistic. The question is, then what? Well, since then, we have a record number of women running for office, a record number of women winning office. We have our first openly gay governor in a state where 20 years ago, Exactly. In a state where 20 years ago, we put it in our state constitution that it was legal to discriminate against people based on sexual orientation. Now, all of that happened because we looked and we saw the truth. We saw how things were. It pissed us off. We despaired. And on the other side of that despair, we came out and we voted. Right? We saw some definitive action. Now, if I vote, it makes no difference whatsoever. If you vote, it makes no difference at all. But if we vote, it does. And that's hope.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Now, Brian, why don't we go to you?
I really like what Jason was talking about that individual accountability, the individual actions reflecting part of a bigger whole, and if we're acting as that whole, we can make that difference. And the way I saw that first, when I had that homelessness, I never actually ended up having to sleep on the streets. People offered me their couches. One person was going out of town and just let me have her apartment for a couple of days. Somebody I didn't really know all that well. People sent me money. A person from high school who I hadn't talked to in 20 years saw a thing on Facebook about it and said, "Hey, I've got some Hotel.com gift cards. Can I give you the codes for them?" And I was blown away by how people who didn't know me, didn't care about me, I thought, still made an effort to do something. And so there was that glimmer of hope of, okay, there are ways that this can work out. And yeah, it sucks right now, but it's not going to be forever. And there are things that can be done about it. And I went through a really bad self-esteem period. And one of the things, I went through a lot of aha moments. I'm a lot of heavy therapy. But one of those aha moments was that self-worth isn't something you find. It's something you declare. It's, hey, I'm a person, I matter too. And so choices, for me, is where that hope comes from. I see hope not as something we find or something that's given to us, but something we decide on. That we're choosing to say, hey, maybe this sucks right now. Damn it, I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to vote. Yeah, maybe my vote individually doesn't matter, but I'm going to vote and I'm going to encourage other people to. And if we're all voting, there you go. More people didn't vote in the last election than voted for any candidate. If all of those candidates voted, or if all of those voters voted, it could have been anybody's race.
Yeah.
Big systems can change from those combined actions of individuals. And it's a shame that Stan Lee passed, because I think he would have had a lot to say about this, about how it's our individual choices that we decide whether we're going to make a difference or not. We can choose to be the hero or we can choose to be the villain. And I hope I covered that well in Rectifier, showing two people that made that same decision, but in very different ways and with different outcomes. Because it's up to us individually to make those choices, to take the actions, to do things, and maybe even inspire others while we're at it to also do things, and collectively make a difference and just change things for the better.
Fingers crossed, right? So Tierman, if you want to go into your idea of hope and what you've drawn from.
Yeah. The first thing that makes me hopeful is, I mean, you guys, the people I'm talking to, everywhere I turn, I'm lucky enough to have a circle of friends and acquaintances where most people are creative in some way, even the ones who want to move. So every direction I turn, I see a new project saying humanity can be better than this. We can get together, we can fight the darkness in ourselves, and we can make a difference. I've seen so many amazing projects come out of this time of turmoil, so many amazing ways to stand up for each other. I said this earlier and I forgot to say that what I'm raising money for is the Transgender Law Center. they come up with to raise awareness and raise money are amazing. But everybody's doing something. People are opening their eyes and they're opening their hearts to say what we vaguely accepted before. We're seeing exactly how bad it can be, and now it's unacceptable.
Yeah.
We used to say, yeah, if you work here, you kind of got to watch out for Dave. Now we're saying, dude, who's going to fire Dave? You used to say, you know, you just have to deal with that if you live in this world. Now we're saying, no, we're screwing each other over. Let's stop, because the worse it gets, the more we're messing ourselves up. Another thing that gives me hope is the generation down from me. I'm a millennial, I'm 30-something. And the generation that comes after me, they are on it, guys. They are sometimes more well-versed in politics than I am, because some days my response is, I can't take this today, I'm going to work. They are so fierce. I mean, I'm getting calls from some of my younger cousins, and the projects they are doing just amaze me. And this is the thing for me. I used to try to live up to my ancestors. Now I try to do things that make my younger generation hopeful and proud. And that's a big shift. And the last thing that gives me hope is putting on, Bon Jovi and Rent and just rocking out. We got through the 60s. We got through the 80s. We got through a lot of bad times. And yeah, a lot of people died. I'm not saying they didn't. But for me, I come from two lineages of people. I'm half Menominee and half Irish. The Menominee are the tribe of Upper Wisconsin. There's been some shit. But we're still here. And that's the last thing that gives me hope. We have all seen some shit, and we are still here, and we are not giving up.
Well, I think that's probably the perfect note to end on. We are here, and we aren't giving up, and hopefully we'll continue to see that enact hope and enact change, and just move forward, keep moving forward. So just to conclude, this has been the Amphibian Press podcast, and I'm Sarah Voris, and with me today are 4 of the authors of the Colorado Resistance Reads, which again is just a great group of authors who have come together to help support various different causes that mean the most to them and to their work. And they're 50% of their profits between 11/23 and 12/4 are going to go to these various causes. And you can check out more on coresistancereads.wordpress.com. And as usual, all of the links will be in the show notes.
If I can add just one point on that.
Go for it.
Obviously, we're in Colorado here, but I know I've heard from other people who really find this campaign interesting and a way for us writers to give back. I mean, we all want to make whatever change we can with our own skills. And we've tried to take a hold of this hashtag Resistance Reads. And if anybody out there would like to emulate this, get together a group of writers in their state or in their genre or their area, that please get in touch. It's coresistancereads.wordpress.com. or we're on Twitter and Facebook, and we'd love to see other people take this idea and run with it. Let's see what else people have to say, and let's get people thinking across the country.
Yeah, and definitely if folk who follow us, want to get in contact with you, just email us, and we can send you in the right direction if you can't find the links or anything. So,
yeah, rock on. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.